All right, welcome to another episode of The Path to You. We are joined by Coach Jesse Clark. Jesse,
How are
how
you?
did you get to, I'm good, how are you? We're going to start with the question, how did you get to this point in your life? How did you get here?
Well, I got here today by reconnecting with you. I was in the pursuit of knowledge in the space of social media and had started a show on YouTube with some colleagues and was needing some advice from people outside of my coaching network, and always been one to pursue relationships outside of my circle. And so it was awesome to connect back with you. So that's literally how I got here today.
Yeah. And that's going to drive me into my next question. I actually have two. One, you've always been really good about connecting to people outside of basketball and always been, I feel like, a learner, whether it's like books you've recommended me or, you know, our Sunday nights at, oh God, what was that place called with Coop?
Artie's,
Artie's, yes.
giving a shout out to Artie's, yes.
Yeah. So you've always seemed to want to expand, whether it's your mind or your network. Where do you see the benefit in that? How has it helped you as a coach? Where did that come from for you?
I mean, I think by nature, I'm incredibly social. I love people. I love conversating with people. I love challenging and being challenged to different ideas. I think freedom of thought is an incredible, powerful tool that we don't exercise enough as humans. So I think all those things have sent me always searching for talking points, conversations that are going to challenge the way I think, and then also be attracted to people that are going to allow themselves to be challenged at times as well. So, you know, I think I've always been that way. My career path has been such a unique journey, from coaching at my alma mater right after I finished school, to spending time all up and down the West Coast at different universities and getting out of coaching and being a stay-at-home father for a year, to getting back into it. And so just the journey has been really crooked, and I love it. I love it. I am a habitual changer of my office, habitual changer of my home. The feng shui needs to be changed every year would be a stretch, but like people that have coached with would attest that generally after every season, my office changes around. And I think some of that I feel there's this innate thing that I feel like I have sort of peeled off whatever layer that path we just went on was, and just it's a sort of a symbolic thing. I mean, I remember doing this as a kid, changing my room around every 6 months, you know, and like coming up with just a new way, like, how can I be by the window differently? How can my bed be over there differently? It just gives me a different perspective. And I always felt really refreshed every time I did that. And so, you know, I'm in my 24th or 5th year of coaching college basketball. And so those are like little tips and tricks of like, being able to sort of create that refresh and that reset and make sure that I'm being challenged. It's just a reminder to challenge myself to think differently, just because I walk into my office and something's in a different place. So, you know, you hear those studies like drive yourself to work differently and take a different path. And, you know, and I can attest, there's been times where like things are like in the middle of the season or something. And I'll go, how the heck did I get home? Like, you know, like you just jumped in the car and you got on autopilot, and next thing you knew you were home, or next thing you knew you were going to work, and next thing you knew you're in the office. Like that's not good. Your brain is way better than that. So, yeah, so that's sort of like the background, the long-winded background to the why I probably am the way I am in your observation.
I don't think it was long-winded at all. I think it was a full answer. So let's talk about your coaching career. You coached right after you finished right at your alma mater, did you always know that you wanted to coach? Was there some level that you wanted to play more? And how did you make that transition so easily?
I did. Once I got to college and started playing in college, I think I knew I wanted to coach. I mean, I think leadership has always been something that has come fairly natural to me. And I don't know yet, even at this point in my life, that I can completely pinpoint that. But like I went to a tiny private high school, so I say this with a grain of salt, but as a sophomore, I was elected student body president in my high school. Granted, it was very tiny, so that's not that impressive necessarily in that grand scheme of things, but kind of, right? It's a sophomore and you have seniors and juniors that are still voting for president, and you're probably running. I don't even remember who I was running against, but I'm sure I was running against somebody that's a senior or junior. But so I think that always spurred me to, and I was always a team captain, and I was a captain my entire college career. And, so I think through a lot of that, just some of that natural part of who I am. So yeah, in college, I started helping out my college roommate, who at the time was coaching a prep school, and I would just help him out periodically. And I really, really enjoyed the feedback and and just the time to mentor, and whatnot. And so I was finishing my degree in business. And so at the time, the athletic department at our school, I went to NAI school, Pacific Union College, and it was a small department. And they were like, well, we need somebody to help to run the athletic department on a day-to-day basis. Why don't you come do that? And then you can be an assistant on the women's basketball team. And so that's how that started there. And then I was the head coach right after that. After a year there, I was the head coach for 6 years after that.
Wow.
And so, but it was in that time I got married, and Kelly was like, you really want to do this this is your thing, right? And I'm like, yeah, of course. She's like, well, we need to plan to move forward, and so I'd been making some connections. And so that's how I ended up at Cal State Bakersfield for a year. Then from there, that brought us back up to Northern California and coached at the University of San Francisco for a couple. Jacob was born, and then that's the year I stayed at home after that. Then I got connected at Stanford. I was a video coordinator at Stanford for Tara. Then that's where our paths crossed at St. Mary's, because that's where I went to St. Mary's after that, during that time. And then came to San Diego State, where I was for 5 years. And now I've been at Point Loma Nazarene University, seeing the Pacific Ocean literally every single day. As someone loves the water and all of the ways the universe feeds you from that and the sand, I am in a good place.
Yeah. So it's very interesting that you have literally gone up and down the West Coast. Is there, not potential, but would you move somewhere else? Like, as much as you love the ocean, as blessed as you've been to stay in California or somewhere on the side, would you go to like a Nebraska or something like that?
It's funny because, yeah, I would, but it would have to be the right people, and that, because I think that would be, that part of it would fuel my soul, in a way that I need, that the ocean and the sand and being close to that, and having sort of the physical lifestyle that we get to live in California, where you can be in the mountains and then 2 hours later you're literally on the beach. Like, such a unique lifestyle. So I would but a lot of that's hinging, and it's sort of on the back burner of my life, because of Jacob, and he's 15 now, he's a freshman, and his mom is remarried now, and they have a little sister. And so we have a really amazing modern family. We have family Sunday night dinner, all of us together. It's become a tradition. And so, and him and I, now that he's older, we have legit combos. And it's like, if dad got an opportunity and he's just like, nah, man, he's like, I love this right now. And it's like, and I'm sort of speaking my paraphrased version of his response as a 15-year-old, but it's like, it's important to him and it's important to me because of that. And, and I think that I know how fast life goes, and 3 years from now, he graduates from high school, and then I can do whatever the heck I want, and I can go where I want. I mean, heck, maybe I decide to move to Europe and coach in Europe or Australia, or, you know, like there's no parameters, there's no box. So I don't know what that's going to look like. So yeah, I'm definitely open to that. But again, my whole career, my whole life journey has been enjoying, you know, that cliche of like, and be where your feet are. And I've always tried to be that way. And then the things that have come next have really just presented themselves in the most timely of ways. And I'll be lying to say that hasn't always been the case. I know when I was trying to get back into coaching after staying at home with Jacob, that was hard. Like there were some times where I had some angst and some like, well, I've been doing this already and I know these people and it's like, they should be, you know. So I would be disingenuous to say that I'm just sitting there and all zenned out. I'm like, oh yeah, my whole life, it's always just happened. And that's not saying that, but through perspective and knowing what I know and knowing where I've been and knowing where I am willing to be, you know, it's going to be the right thing's going to come up at the right time, and we'll pursue it then.
Good stuff. Let's talk about that year off. And, you know, something that I want to talk to you about was balancing being a dad and being a coach, and how do you balance that life? And let's start there, and I'll ask the other question about that year off.
The balancing thing has always been easy, right? Like when I was married and I was like, I mean, I never got good at golf because that 3 hours on the golf course would be time that I could spend with my family. And that was a responsibility that I had. I'm so appreciative that Jacob's mom, who played in Division I basketball, like understands the lifestyle and understands all that. And there was never any angst with that. But I always knew innately that just because of that didn't mean I could take advantage of and go jack around and pursue things that were disingenuous to what I was telling our players, which is family and your pursuit of joy through basketball. And that, so those were really easy things. It's to be honest, it was really easy. Like it doesn't stress me out at all because it's an easy choice. Sacrifice some dumb stuff that really doesn't matter for the stuff that does matter. You know, if you're pursuing joy, you're pursuing the things that really matter to you and not the things that are innately selfish, right? Like, yeah. I would love to be good at golf. I think golf is one of those incredibly challenging things, and it would be, but again, I still got time for all that. But right now, what brings me joy is mentoring young women that I'm coaching and being home as equally as much and mentoring Jacob and having that life experience. So the balancing thing is just about making choices and staying away from stuff that innately is really self-serving.
Self-serving, interesting. An off-topic question that I have, but you had mentioned joy a number of times now. Do you think that there is a difference between happiness and joy? And if so, what is the difference?
Yes, very much so, because I think joy is a state of mind, and happiness is sort of a pursuit, maybe, and it's fleeting, like, because you can't be happy all the time, right? But I can be joyful all the time. I can be joyful when things are crappy, like we're going through what we're going through as a world, and we haven't been able to see our players. But I find joy to know that I still get to be in their life, albeit in a different way. That brings me joy. But I'm not happy that I can't see them every day physically because I really feed off of that fuel. So there's the difference, right? Like I'm happy to see you, or I am joyfully having to see you and see you in my life. Like there's two totally different things.
Yeah,
like
that instant versus being.
I'm mad at you and I can't stand you right now because you just screwed up that out of bounds play. But I am at such a place of joy that I even get to say that to you right now. You know, that's the difference, right?
Yeah,
and if
sure.
you can't, and so to pursue that, and it took me a long time to be able to articulate all that and say all that, for sure. I mean, there's thought leaders in my life that are just like amazing, and that I've had to learn that difference, right? Like I probably would be the first person to be like, oh yeah, pursue happiness, and I couldn't really articulate that. Man, every time I would try that, I was like, well, I'm not happy right now. So, you know, what's going on,
Yeah.
you know? And it's like, I mean, like going through a divorce, like that's not happy, but I found joy in that journey because we all were happy. We all were joyful about that. It made all of our lives better, and we were able to have that, even though it was gross and it was sad and it was hard for a while, but we worked through all that. So, you know, it's just a much better, it's a much better word. You know, we always try to put labels on this and that and the other thing, but the pursuit of joy it's a constant, and it's just a much easier place to hook into when you have a crappy day, you know, and or a crappy moment. So
yeah, let's talk about some of those thought leaders. I know that you mentioned that a lot in like your tweets, and you've talked about it here. What is a thought leader to you, and who are some people that are your thought leaders?
I think they come in so many different forms and in different moments. Like it's such a timely thing, you know. I mean, like, and to be honest with you, that phrase is a new phrase that I stole from one of our former players, who sort of in this journey that I've gone on with just doing the show with my colleagues and everything. Like her and her husband have a show, and they're professional bike racing coaches. And so they had a show, and so we were just catching up, and she challenged me on that same question that you just asked, but I had never framed it in that word. And so it's just like, you know, like people professionally that in the coaching profession that I know I can call up and ask about a concept, you know. I mean, referencing back to our time at St. Mary's, you know, Adam Cooper and I will have a chat like every couple of months. Kai Edwards and I will have a chat every couple of months. Paul Thomas and I have a chat all the time. Allison Fastneck, Tracy Johnson Sanders, you know, all these people, like Lisa O'Mara, who's doing incredible work now with Key 5 coaching. Like these are people that, like, you know, I've worked with day in and day out, pursued things with, and now like they have different things going on in their life. I have the same, but it's like you can just pick them up. So professionally, those are the things there. You know, outside of coaching, I try to find people that are not confirming what I already know, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And so that comes in many different ways, you know, like, I mean, you know, I try to stay away from things that are like, where it's just a headline and a statement for a statement's sake, and wanting to be around people that when they make a statement, here's the statement, and then here's why I think that way. Mm-hmm. And so that comes in really, you know, it's across the board. And it's also situational, you know. I mean, like going through what we're going through now is like become so politicized and so on fire with that, and so headline grabbing without substance. And it's like having to like wade through all that and be like, wait, I need to ask why. I need to figure out why I think this way or why they think this way. And then, I need to change how I'm thinking, or I want to change how I'm thinking because I didn't know, I was misinformed, or I didn't have enough information. So for me, thought leaders are anybody that just challenges me or allows and encourages that freedom of thought. And I think that, just like I said, comes in so many different ways, you know. I mean, like 3 names that come to mind that are outside of coaching, like Dave Rubin, Ben Shapiro, Joe Rogan, you know, like people that just say constantly are like, you know, challenging what you thought about something, and you don't, and yet they're doing it without asking you to think the way that they think. They just going like, listen, here's why I think it, here's why I think this, and this is why, y'all figure it out. That's at the end of it. And I love that. And I think I try to have that as a coach. Like I try to do that with Jacob, with my son. It's like, you know, and through all that too, I also have realized that you can't be slamming people across the face with that challenge either. Sometimes you have to meet people where they are at in that moment, because they may not be in that same pursuit. They may not be pursuing thought leaders. They may not be in a growth mindset yet. They may not be in that, you know, and like you said, on my social media, I really put that out there, but it's like, I'm also okay with if that's not where you're at right now. I'm totally okay with that, because that's your journey and your path, and you know, your path for joy may totally be different than my path for joy. And that's awesome. And they can
coexist.
Absolutely. I think I said something about that on social. You just see people get into arguments over stuff. And I remember taking my master's classes, and it's something I thought for a long way. When you have a conversation about one's history, then you can begin to understand why they think the way that they think. And so that's the conversation we should be having first. I should be learning about your background and where you've come from and your journey. Because then when you make a statement of an opinion, now I have a little more reason why you're saying what you're saying. And that's really where we really get better as human beings and get better as people. And in my relationships with people, in my relationships with our players, in my relationships with my son, it's like, I need to understand that history and that experience and all that why before I can even formulate. Otherwise, I'm just making a headline decision on one vein of a statement. Right. That's jacked up.
Yeah. There's a quote that I love that everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. And you may see it, you may not see it, but there's always something going on internally, and that could reflect back out to you on some level.
So good. It's such a great way to say it. So great.
The thought that I have from there, where did it go? Why do you think it's hard for, maybe not hard isn't the right word, but our society doesn't necessarily think that way. It goes very surface of, this is what happened and now I'm upset, or this person did this to me and now it's going to go viral, versus actually having dialogue and conversation of either their feelings or asking about something. Like the thing that comes to mind, to give you some context, was there was a video that went viral on Twitter of a woman that reclined her seat on a plane, and the guy behind her didn't have a way to recline his seat. So she was in his space, and he starts poking at her chair the rest of the flight. And she posts a video on some social media site, and there was conflict, or there's conversation around like, who's in the wrong? Is she wrong for encroaching his space and not talking to him, or is he in the wrong for trying to push her out of his space? But I feel like it would have just been so much easier if one of them just said like, hey, do you mind if I come into your space? Or, hey, could you mind not being in my space? Versus there's not being any dialogue.
Which should have been really the conversation, right? Like yeah. The responses, that should have been the conversation. But the problem is that doesn't like generate, because that's the obvious answer. Like if you really sat down and like looked at the situation, that's really what we all know somewhere in our human DNA. That's exactly what should have gone down.
Yeah.
And I think for the most part, like we've all flown and traveled enough. Like if you were in that same situation, you probably would have looked back, seen the situation, said, hey, and then, right? Like that probably happens way more often than what we think. Or the other way, like, man, I don't get to, excuse me, like, and so it's just boring. It's boring sometimes. Sometimes the right thing is boring. And that's why I think sometimes we don't innately go there, and we get into these skirmishes to just have something exciting to BS around about, maybe. I mean, that's just sort of my off the top of my head response to that. But I think that, in some ways it's the boredom part of it. Like, well, but I was having a conversation, in fact, before we connected today with one of our just graduates, and she picks up the phone and she goes, I'm like, how are you doing? She's like, I'm bored. So that's like my least favorite thing. Like, are you kidding me right now? Yeah. Like, you could sit in your house all day and go nowhere and still not be bored. Like there's so much that goes on in between our ears and our brain that is so amazing. So that's where I think it's the easy answer, right? Like that's why, going back to my reference of sort of that freedom of thought. Like freedom of thought requires taking the time to think that way, and being willing to be quiet and be silent and pursue those thoughts. And sometimes it's easier to just grab the headline, form something and go,
Right.
Why do you think like fast food became so popular, right? It's like, well, I have a little hunger twinge, but I don't really want to go cut myself some carrots and slice some tomatoes and eat that, right? I need to go get a burger at McDonald's. So, And it's not that there's anything innately wrong necessarily. It's just
Right.
what's better for your hunger craving, you know?
Right.
So
Yeah. I'm going to dive deeper on this because I appreciate the way that you think. And so let's see where this goes. There is a school of thought, and I forgot which podcast I heard this on, that as humans, we have this innate flight or fight system. And before, we were scared of being eaten by lions, and we don't have that sense of fear anymore. We've created such a zone of comfort. We can adjust the thermostat on our or adjust the temperature in our rooms, and everything is so easy on some level that we create these flight or fight moments to be able to use our mind in the way that it's meant for. What are your thoughts on that?
yes, I can see that. I can see that. And it's funny because like, and maybe I'm stuttering kind of because I don't know that I can relate to it, because I think that part of my brain, I'm trying to pursue not controversy, but a deeper level of thinking. And I think that's maybe that goes maybe back to what I was saying earlier, is like maybe that flight or fight idea is one of those things it's like we want that spark, that adrenaline rush of that fight or flight, I guess, you know. And maybe it's one of those things why I'm one of those people that soccer came late to my life, but like for me, watching soccer is one of those things, like the build up to the score is so amazing and so subtle and so just packed with depth and packed with like nuance. I love all that, you know? I mean, I don't know, and you may have to edit this part out, but I always equate to like, it's like good sex. Like good sex is going to be like, there's going to be to the fireworks, there's going to be some buildup, not going to come in many different forms. But at the end of the day, like that's where the good stuff is at. It's the buildup. It's the stuff that you go through. So I think a lot of times maybe that fight or flight is like that idea of like just skipping forward to the end result, you know, and that adrenaline rush, right? Because the score happens and it's boom. I mean, it's euphoric. And maybe sometimes that's that you skip the buildup just to create, you know, that adrenaline rush of that fight or flight. You're trying to pursue something like that, you know, and because you're bored, right? Like you're not using that part of your brain because you're bored. So you've been sitting around just sort of taking it all in and not thinking about it in any sort of depth. And so now you're bored. So now I'm going to create some shit.
Yeah,
you know?
you need to create that spark. Yeah, yes. That makes sense. Yeah. It's interesting what you had said about soccer, and it's almost like we go back to that state of joy and happiness. Like you're in the state of joy watching the game, and then when they score, it's that moment of happiness because they scored.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And complete and utter dismay and disgust when the other team you're not rooting for scores, you know.
For sure.
Like, it's the worst, you know, because you've been in this deep just pursuit of it, and then all of a sudden it goes one way or the other. But again, I love that you brought that circle back on that. That's a great way to say it. Yeah.
I have thoroughly enjoyed becoming a football fan ever since I started working for the Quakes, and my journey from that has just been a joy to go back to games and just be a fan and be in it versus like having to work it. Right. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, it is my favorite. I'm not a fan of like a team, and years ago, Cody Warden, who worked for Adam Cooper at St. Mary's, and we were getting along really well, and he's like, and Jacob was probably only like 3, but of course he's running around campus, and you know he's at every soccer game because those are our mates, so we go to the games, and then you know, and it's like Cody's like he's like you have to pick a team, you know, and so it's like that's when I like got into Liverpool because they reminded me of all my growing up teams in the Northwest, where it's like they were always decent but never could win. And Supersonics like made it to the finals. I mean, got revisited that with this whole like Michael Jordan thing where they beat Sonics, you know, and you're like, oh God, that was painful. You know, and it's like Seattle Mariners like win like 100 and something games and get swept out of the first round.
Yeah.
You know, it's like Jacob tries to say, oh, well, Dad, the Seahawks have won since, and I'm like, well, I quit claiming them because I haven't lived in Washington forever. And so it's like, they kind of aren't in my face anymore.
Yeah.
But anyway, so yeah, so that's how we started watching soccer and very passionate about it. The other thing I love, talk about balance, right? Circle back to that. Like the best thing I tell people in my line of work in athletics that aren't soccer fans, the best thing about it is it's on at like 4 a.m. It's over by like 9, and then you can still go do stuff with your family or go do something else. But yet you've been able to watch like sport for like 3 hours. You know, it's not like NFL football where you're like wasting your whole day away just to watch a football game. You know?
Yeah,
so,
there's a set amount of time. It's 2 45-minute halves. That's it.
Yeah. And I really started getting into it because there was no advertising. It was just pop up on the screen, like no commercials.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. It's a lot of fun. I wanted to go back to that, full circle back, that year you took off to be a stay-at-home dad and the journey back into coaching. How, you said it wasn't easy, you know, how was that transition? Because I know that there are so many people, whether it's male or female, that transition out to stay at home with their kids and then try to go back into the workforce, and it can be a difficult thing.
I mean, I was very fortunate in the sense of my stay-at-home time. I was around the sport because at the time Kelly was the strength and conditioning coach at Stanford for the women's basketball team there. So I was very fortunate. So like while I was not coaching and I was not involved in that way, I was around basketball and around, you know, one of the elite programs in the country and around elite coaches and whatnot. So I mean, like Jacob and I would travel on the away games. And so, I mean, I'm still in it a little bit there. So I have to, you know, it wasn't like I was just out and didn't have any connection to it. So I was very, very fortunate in that aspect. The joy in that was that was a conscious choice by Jacob and not Jacob, but Kelly and I. One of us was going to do that. We had already decided because she was at Cal at the time and I was at University of San Francisco. And so she had the opportunity to go to Stanford. And so it was like a no-brainer that I was like, all right, it's me. And so it was the best. I mean, I love it, you know? And so I'm so glad that I did it. It gives me such an appreciation. And I think that, you know, it gives me opportunity to advise younger men, like, dude, you can do this and still come out the other side. It gives me a chance to relate to moms that have done it, and, you know, and like I got you, I get it. And your struggles are real. Like there's nothing more intense than a 3-month-old screaming their head off and they can't tell you why. And you've changed their diaper 4 times already and you fed them. It's the best, worst thing that one can ever do. So the journey out though was like, at first it was like, I thought I almost rewound again. Like I actually started interviewing for high school jobs in Palo Alto and had a couple offers, and Tara comes to me one day in the summer and she says, what are you doing? Why don't you just come be the video coordinator for me? And so like, oh, okay, well, that's a better way to get back in. So, but then after that year, I knew I wanted to be back on the sideline. You know, being a video coordinator, you're not able to connect with the players in a meaningful way as far as, you know, on the court and developing those kind of relationships that you get to as a court coach. So that was something I wanted to really do. And so it was that journey of like trying to figure that all out and what that was going to look like. And it was like, you know, you're in this, like, what jobs are there and what's happening? And looking back, I went about it all the wrong way. It's like, I should have been more grounded in what I was doing. I went it the wrong way because it created a lot of angst and a lot of unhappiness into that pursuit of the joy of coaching. And it was unnecessary. And if I had just sort of looking back, if I had just been really grounded and been continue to be elite at what I was doing at that moment, the next thing would have come along, but it would have, which is what indeed happened. And that's where I got hooked up at St. Mary's with Paul. But it was a lot of stress unnecessarily. And so that's where I love that line, you know, be where your feet are. And it's kind of a cliche, and I'm not a huge cliche person, but if it resonates and it has meaning, then it's worth saying and sharing with people. So, and that one definitely has that for me. And I would, in any work that anyone does, you know, like if you're invested and you're not necessarily happy, but you're in a place of joy, and however that manifests itself, and it could be from multiple avenues, from your partner, from your family, from your friends, whatever that looks like, then the thing that comes into your life that's going to be creating more happiness it's going to manifest itself. And sometimes it's what you thought it was going to be, and sometimes it's totally not what you thought it was going to be.
Can you talk about a moment where it totally wasn't what you thought it was going to be? Has that come up for you?
When I was leaving San Diego State after being there for 5 years, and it was just a sort of a time where I needed to pivot a little bit and just sort of control where I was at for me personally, and a couple of years after our divorce, and just was like, needed to be a little bit more intentional about my time being home. And I knew that being in Division I, and while it fueled me, it also was taking from me more than I needed to let it take. And so I basically was like, I'm going to stop. And I didn't know necessarily what was going to be next. And kind of what came into my life was an opportunity to work with a friend of mine in Australia who runs a travel company that tours people. So for 2 years, I was involved in traveling to Australia all the time. Like, so, but that was one of those things where it's like, I didn't know what it was. But what I tell people with that story is like, I knew that not being at San Diego State anymore and being, and the unhappiness that it was creating was taking away from the joy of the profession and the craft and the joy of being in Jacob's life and all that. That was not healthy, and I just wasn't in a good space. And so just, you know, I didn't know what was going to happen. I mean, I kind of had I was willing to that at that point. It was like, I knew I needed to put food on the table. So, you know, and I also knew it needed to be in San Diego. So at that point, everything was on the table, if that was going to work at Enterprise or what have you, because my joy was that I was raising Jacob with his mom 10 minutes away. That was where my joy was at. That had trumped my professional pursuits. And I mean, I know some people might find this like very sort of out there, but like, I believe that decision was made and the universe said, here you go. I'm going to take care of you and put this in your life. And what's crazy about this, Leilani, is so through that, so in San Diego, there's UCSD, Heidi Vanderveer, head coach there, good friend of mine. We work together at USF. She's the head coach. Renee Jimenez is the head coach at Cal State San Marcos. So that's literally just up the street. So, and I've known Renee forever. Renee has wanted me to work with her in the past. It just never worked out. And so now it's funny that we're in the same community, right? Different other coaches in town. So I literally just sent them each an email. And I said, this is what I'm doing. I'm available just to come and watch training and just jot down some notes and just learn from you guys. And then if there's anything I can do to just be a advisor in an obviously completely hands-off manner, I'd love to come watch practice. And then I also sent that same email to Lisa Faulkner at Point Loma, who I didn't know as well, but I knew through a couple other colleagues. So we knew of each other. And so I sent those emails out, of course, Heidi, yes, of course, you're coming. Open door. Renee, open door. Boom, boom. Blah, blah. Leilani, within 1 hour of sending the email to Lisa, she's inviting me to come to lunch because she was at a place where she was making a change on her staff. Finished her second year of coaching at Point Loma. It was her first head job. They'd already gone to a West Regional final. They're winning, like innately, right in the box thinking. You go, oh well, there's nothing there. It's not like I'm literally just going to go because they're winning. I want to learn. I want to get better. That was really my whole intention. So going back to what you said earlier, sometimes you don't know. You put stuff out, and you don't, you don't know how it's going to come back to you. And so the two that were like the most obvious, the most connections that I had, that I knew really they were going to let me come to practice whenever I wanted. And then this third one that I didn't know as well was in a space in her universe that she needed to bring someone. So literally within 10 days of making a decision to give up something, I got it back twofold. I'm getting to travel to a place in the world that I love. And I'm, oh, by the way, still getting to pursue my joy of coaching and, you know, fuel myself that way. So, I mean, I hope that doesn't come off as like all sort of like, this dude's a bullshit, man. This guy's like getting a golden spoon. But I just really like, again, it was, you know, and it's hard to articulate in a conversation, right? Unless no one's been with you, but it was like really, really crappy for a little while before I left that. And it took me a while to realize leaving state was what I needed to do, and getting out of that situation was going to be the best thing. But again, I think it was a lot more of just that giving it up, but then being willing to, you had to sort of put it out to the right things and the right ways. And it came back, you know, like I said, in an extra way. And then the byproduct of that is, you know, getting to have the relationship that I have with Jacob and with his mom and her husband and his little sister, and, you know, and creating some family traditions in a very non-family, traditional family. So.
It's interesting you say non-traditional family. It's like non-traditional based off of, I think, our recent standards, but I think for me, when I think of family, like you're thinking of the whole village. You're thinking of everyone that's involved in helping raise this person. Because for me, like my family is very non-traditional as well. My mom is good friends with my dad's ex-wife and like was always present in my sister's life. So I think it depends on whose standards of tradition. And
sure, that's such a great point, because I mean, I know that, you know, getting to grow up in coaching, you know, Jacob's had so many mentors and people that care about him, that cared about, you know, his mom and myself, and that are massively important in his life, you know, and at all these different times, you know. Mm-hmm. So it's such a great way to reframe that.
Yeah. I think again, it's those labels. We get stuck on those labels and their definitions, but I think it goes back to feelings and intentions, and what's our intention behind what we do, and the feelings that we have with people. And I think that's that trumps the labels.
And being willing, and the desire, and being willing to pursue what may become an uncomfortable thing in the ask of the why. Like a lot of times that becomes uncomfortable, whether it's you're asking yourself a why,
yeah,
or through that journey, right? You brought back to the whole example of the chair thing on the airplane. And it's like, literally that whole thing would have been squashed if the conversation was like, hey, do you mind? Or, hey, do you mind? You know, yeah. And their why of like that's so that it felt better to like just tap the thing the whole time. That felt better to you, right? Like instead of literally your whole day would have been made if you had just had a conversation. And then, you know, maybe through it, like you said, like maybe she's like, you know, I just had surgery on my hip and I have to do it. And that human innate of caring, which we all have. Don't let the universe, don't let the headline people say we don't have that, because we do, right? Like that innate person, like, oh, rock it on back. I totally all good.
Yeah.
Like that, or vice versa, right? Like,
Yeah.
you know, I just had knee surgery and you brought your chair back. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Let me put my chair up. Like,
right.
That's just a conversation.
Yeah.
You know, and getting outside of our comfort zone, outside of ourself, and, you know, instead of that. So I never understood like the laying of the horn when somebody's like mad in traffic, or the flip off, or, you know, like, come on, like, you don't know. Like, have you read the book, This Is Water?
No.
Oh my gosh. I'm totally botching, but basically it's a commencement speech. The author, I'm totally, I should be way on top of this, but this gets me thinking, like, in his commencement speech, it's turned into a book. You should get it. It's amazing. Because the writer has passed away. This is really good for your show, Dead Air, right? But it's okay. So it's from David Foster Wallace is the author, and it's a book that's his commencement speech. So the book is really like a couple phrases on each page. But in the book, he's basically speaking to graduating seniors, and he talks about the idea of, in reference to, you may hate Hummers on the freeway because they're big, gas guzzling, like you're an eco-friendly person, you're about the environment, and you see that Hummer and you're like, this is bullshit. Why is this freaking car on the road? They're so big, they're taking it. And, you know, and you're in your Prius and you're flipping them off and you're like, they suck. What you don't know is this person used to drive a Prius or used to drive a really eco-friendly car, and either they or someone in their family got into an incredibly horrific accident. And the only way that this person can function in life is to get into that big old vehicle and get on the freeway to get from A to B. That is the only way they can function. You don't know that. Yeah. Now, and he also allows that may not be the case. They just need to be really into gas guzzling big old cars.
Yeah.
But you don't know that unless you ask.
Yep.
And there's uncomfortableness in the ask, because the ask, as like I alluded to before, you ask yourself some why questions that may create some angst and some like, oh shit moments. Like, but you know what? We also talked about that energy burst and that thing. Like when you have that oh shit moment, like there's no more boredom right now. You're in it. You're in that. You're in it. And the journey there and the journey out of that why is intense and not boring at all, and sometimes scary and ugly, but also ultimately thrilling and ultimately just amazingly epic that when you come out the other side of it.
Yeah. When you go through the fear, it's amazing what is on the other side. Yeah.
Yes.
There's I don't know if you've seen the video of Will Smith and talking about skydiving.
Yes.
Yeah. So that allowed me to have the courage to go skydiving. I had some friends that are wingsuit, or what is it called? Wingsuiters. Yeah, they wear the wingsuits and they jump out of planes or they jump off buildings. And so I knew a guy that did that also was a professional skydiver. So he's like, whenever you want to go, let me know. Saw that video and I was like, well, I guess I'm gonna go.
Guess I gotta go.
And literally, like the whole time getting into the plane, going up, you're just like, okay, if this is my end point, I mean, it's a way to go. But it's interesting that's your thought, that this is my end point. Like, why am I going to die from skydiving when it's probably safer than driving a car?
Right.
And the moments that you are free falling and you're literally flying, it's just like Will Smith says, it's like, it's complete bliss. You are doing the thing that you never thought that you could do. And here you are doing it. But it's getting through that fear of, well, I could die from this, but I'm going to do it anyways.
Why do you think we don't do that? Like, why don't we think we take that stance in life, like, more?
I think it's that level of how much we're in our comfort zones and that uneasiness of stepping out of the comfort zone. It's the vulnerability of like, what are people going to think of me? And if we let that penetrate our thought, and the discomfort of what that could be, it doesn't necessarily feel good. And so if it doesn't feel good, then why am I going to do it? But once you get through that not feel good phase,
Yeah,
it's freaking amazing. It's even
it's
better than the
it's
comfort.
that unhappy versus happy, and then but I'm really pursuing joy,
Yeah.
right? Like that not feeling good is that it's unhappy and it's like, ugh,
Yeah.
gross. And it's like, there's not enough happy moments that you can string together to become joyful. It's just not there, because it's just every, it's like the coaches that are unhappy, right? Like they've won like 25, 30 games a year and they just can't, you're not finding joy in the winning. That's not
Right.
it. If you're doing that, then, you're going to be a short timer, and it's like the same thing in business, in teaching, in all those things. Whatever your journey you're pursuing, like you can't have these measuring stick moments that's what your joy is. It's not going to work, but so often you're right. Like we're afraid to, I loved how you framed that. Like we're afraid to we worry about, as soon as we let that creep in, we worry about what someone else thinks, and it's okay to be free thinking and be a thought leader of your own space.
Mm-hmm.
And mentoring our players, and it's really hard, and it's taken a long time for me to get through that too, on a personal level. But like guys, like you honestly are such badasses. Do not let anyone take that from you. Like you and live in that, and live in that, and dive and hunker and cling onto it. Live in that. And then you can take the arrows when they come, and it's like, it's my favorite thing about what I do is that conversation. Like the basketball is just the vehicle, but that stuff right there, is the best. Those conversations with not just our players, but just having like with you, like getting to like, I don't know, it's like just getting to know that you're getting to have that kind of a conversation with somebody, because maybe it was at that moment, and whoever's listening to this, like maybe that's at that moment, that's literally the only thing that they needed to hear was, dude, like what you just said, Leilani, like you have to like throw up the little wall there. Like, I don't care what you think about the way I think. And you're not being dismissive of other people's thinking. That's what everyone thinks you're doing there, right? You're thinking you're saying F you to the way you think. No. You're saying, I'm not going to let the way you think of me infringe on how I think of me.
Yeah.
And that right there is the gem.
Yeah.
But everyone wants to reframe that. They want to reframe that. Oh, like you're just being a jerk because you don't want to listen to my opinion. No. Your opinion is trying to kick me in the head, and I don't want that. I'm good. Like, I got this.
Yeah.
But that's hard. It's so hard.
Yeah. Because then what if you then flip the switch and reply back, why are you trying to kick me in the head?
Or what about this? Or you want to kick them in the head for something that they're thinking, and now you've just asked them not to do it to you. So, but then you, in nature, you want to do it to them, right? Like that right there. That is like why I also love coaching, because we have all those moments where, like in team dynamic, right? It's like your leaders, they better be like living the way they want their teammates to be going. Or as coaches, right? Like we need to be living, like we're asking them to be doing this. We need to be manifesting that by our actions, And I think that's what, like, a lot of times people they're okay with the status quo, because it's like, well, shoot, if I call that out, now if I go and I screw something up, now I'm going to get called out, and that feels grimy, and that feels uncomfortable, and that feels gross, and all that kind of stuff. So I think that's a lot of it, is that it's another one of those like feelings, and maybe, I'm very layman in all the way I just described all that. And there's probably people that are way smarter than me that would be able to articulate that better. But that's what it is so fun about coaching and being in a team, is that you learn very quickly how you have the ability to confidently stand for what you believe, but also comfortably in the nest of your team, challenge each other, and
Mm-hmm.
challenge the way other people are doing things, and in a space for ultimately at the end of the day, you're all trying to get to the same space,
Yeah.
So
We talked offline earlier about how the coaching dynamics have evolved and they continue to evolve, and how before it was more of like a top down, whatever the head coach says goes. There's not much of voice from the players, and it's shifting, like you're saying. It's becoming a team challenge and people are challenging each other. Why do you think that shift has happened, and how do you think it'll continue to evolve?
I think it'll continue to evolve because I think that we as humans innately want some intrinsic motivation to be successful. And I think that comes from a place of empowerment and a place of ability to where you can still think freely and yet come to the same end result. I think that's where we've grown in our profession, is that we've realized that there is not one way. In our short history of sport in America, let's take basketball, for instance. Like in my lifetime, we've gone through the grindy New York Knicks, where it was like, we're going to beat the crap out of you, and the Detroit Pistons. And, we, from that was coming out of how we're going to slow down like the Showtime Lakers and all that. And so it came grind and like just physical. And then through that, you had Michael Jordan and the triangle like manifest itself, but it was still things inside the game. And then, we fast forward and the talent just gets deeper and deeper, and the abilities get better and better. And Kevin Garnett all of a sudden is 7 feet tall, and he grew up watching Michael Jordan. So now he is like Mike, but he's 7 feet tall. So then now you have that, so we, at the end of the day, it's still about winning basketball games. But I just went through sort of this whole like history of like, it can happen in so many different ways. And I think the willingness of coaches to realize that it doesn't always have to look the same. And I think that's the artistry of soccer. It's the artistry of basketball. It's the artistry of hockey. And I think people are finding joy and those moments of happiness in the pursuit of that artistry, and knowing that the result will still be there. And there's more than, we don't have to just kind of do it the way we've always done it. And I think you have so many more coaches that have grown up and have observed that, and are willing to be open to that. We have good, like in my lifetime professionally, like Phil Jackson, Greg Popovich, Steve Kerr in my profession. Those are all people that like, completely like were outside the box thinkers, and yet like, and would have evolved over time, whether it's the people they've coached, how they've coached people. And again, as a Liverpool fan, I'm a massive Jurgen Klopp fan. And if anyone studies Jurgen Klopp, like so much of, yes, he is tactically great. And if he's not tactically great at a certain thing, he's going to go bring in somebody who is and let them run with that and empower that. But at the same time, he's going to empower his people, his players, and he's going to create high levels of expectation. But at the same time, he's hugging on them and he's creating that connectivity on them as human beings. And that's the thing. And I don't know, it'll be interesting to see how this thing all plays out. I'm totally sidewaying here with the Michael Jordan thing. And like all this stuff is going around on social media about how his leadership is that he's like getting on guys and yelling on guys. And in my pursuit of being really trying to be better at what I've done, what I've realized, and all these studies come out and how high fives matter. And these studies come out and you see teams, the NBA tracking high fives because they believe that that touch matters. And also it's like, I guarantee you that Michael Jordan is high-fiving the heck out of his teammates. I guarantee you he's going up and giving the bro hugs, but it's boring. It doesn't make for headlines. It doesn't make for, oh, this is how it is. Like, that's the stuff that like he wouldn't, those dudes would not have followed him like the way they did. They would have not won 6 championships if he was not in some way connecting. And I have no proof other than that, other than my own anecdotal experience of the best programs I've been around. That's how it works.
Yeah.
And the leader can be a tough son of a gun, but at the end of the day, their team knows that they also are going to come give them a high five and a hug later.
Yeah.
And we're going to go, in their case, the NBA, we're going to go play cards together. We're going to go have a drink together. But when it's winning time, this is what we're doing. But there's a connectivity there and that relationship. And so we talk a lot about our show is just that idea of transformational coaching versus transactional coaching. And, I think that's really where it gets in. And it's transactional relationships versus transformational relationships. Like, you have to have people in your life that are back to thought leaders. Like, you're pursuing people and they come in all shapes and sizes. Like, us having this conversation is a total feeding my thought leadership for my box for the week of like, this was amazing. And having those kind of things and having a beer with my neighbor, we're exchanging ideas. That's thought leadership. It doesn't have to come from, I went to this conference or that clinic or what have you. It comes from my son sometimes. He's 15, so like they manifest themselves in so many different ways. And you just have to be in that open-mindedness and that pursuit of it to let it manifest itself in your life. And sometimes it's so subtle that you don't even realize it's happening. But, that's the joy. That's the joy of life in that space.
Yeah. It's the subtleties. And I think that if we go through life in the easy route of just like having things chosen first, going to the fast food and like not actually thinking about things, we can so easily miss those subtleties because we're not constantly looking at life through a lens of like, what am I supposed to learn from this? Or like, you know what I mean? Yeah.
And that challenge, right? And it's like, because it's easier to have that flash moment, that headline, that adrenaline rush, that,
right.
And that fear, like, that angst, I was talking to one of our players last week and she was finishing up finals and she was finished and she was still anxious. And I'm like, why? Talk to me more. Why? And she's just like, I don't know. I can't shift it down. And it's just like, she's got herself so programmed to be like in this space of anxiety, in this space of like, I gotta be stressed about this. I gotta be stressed about, which boy I'm going to call. I got stressed about, did I get my basketball workout in? It's like, oh, her family was going to go, they live up in the Northwest. They were going to go like, just get away for like, cause she was to finish up a school. They were just going to get away. They go camp on the river or something. And like, do that and do not worry about any of this other stuff. Like literally you've got to, and this has been an ongoing conversation with her and I, so that's one moment in time, but to your point, like, being willing to, and it takes work. Like I always tell this story to our players too. Like I used to be the biggest worrier, like until I was about 25. Like I worried about who I was going to marry. I worried about where I was going to live. I worried about what my job was going to look like. Worry. I would be up all night worrying. And Leilani, I shit you not, one day I literally, and I'm not the most religious person at all, but I do remember like consciously praying to whoever, I can't do this anymore. I'm not doing this anymore. And that was it.
Yeah.
Now, because I put it out there, like I literally laid in my bed at like probably 3:30, 4 a.m., literally saying out loud, I can't and I'm not.
Yeah.
Now I had to repeat that like for about another 4 or 5 years before I got decent at it. But that's some of it too. Like, I was saying before, like, I hope people don't think like, gee, Jesus guy, like whatever struggle, is like quits one job and 2 weeks later, he's got 2 more. Like it's then that, like, that's some of the ugly times. Right. And being able to articulate it and be vulnerable and share it. And like, because I know we all have, like you brought it up, you're like, sometimes we just don't know. Right. Like we've got this perception of what they think people's journey is, and you don't know the crap stuff that they've gone through to get to where they are, or why they think the way they think, or why they choose to do the things that they do, unless we ask, and sometimes in the ask, it may be and the subtle things you just brought up, something we do the ask, And all of a sudden it's like, holy crap, now I've got to be challenged. You just challenged me.
Mm-hmm.
And there's uncomfortableness in that.
Yeah.
And, but there's true joy in that pursuit too. So
there's a game, not a game. I read this book. It was called like The Millionaire Success Habits by Dean Graziosi. And I'm not a fan of his so much, but there was one thing I took away from that book was this, I call it a game of the 7 whys. And you ask someone why 7 times, and you tend to get the root of the real reason why they're doing whatever they're doing. So for the gal that was super anxious post-final, okay, well, why are you anxious? Whatever her response is, like, well, I have too much on my plate. Well, why do you have too much on your plate? And then whatever her response is, you keep going until there's that 7th why, and that's usually the root of why they're feeling anxious.
Yeah.
It's pretty
so good. So good. And it's so true. We've actually taken on a tact of, we always, as coaches, well, what do you feel about this season? Or how did you feel the season went on? Right. And I would do the same thing with Jacob, and he's a teenager. And inevitably I'd go, well, how was soccer season this season? Or how was school today? Or what did you feel about school today? And inevitably he would be silent. Or inevitably, like with our own players, you'd get like a cliched answer of that, something that they think you want to hear.
Right.
Or generally it's something negative, like they say something negative about themselves, because they're almost like bracing themselves to like be ready for the negativity, what's going to happen. And this is something that's been new in my life. So on the heels of your asking why, very similar, like asking, what is your experience? And then for me, as you can tell, it's really hard. Like I can get going and it's not so, but I have to let it breathe, right? Like, what's your experience? And right there, a lot of times as a coach and type A, you like want to help feed them like the answer. Right. So you're like with, or with involved,
Yeah.
And what's been fun in the pursuit of that is some of the older kids that I've done this with is that they'll because they've become programmed into their 20s a little bit, that's all. Now I've just peeled back the veil a little bit in a way that's now I just put it there and they have to get vulnerable, and that's uncomfortable. So inevitably they'll ask me back a question, right? Trying to figure out where they should go there with their answer, right? Which is what we do a lot of times. Like you would ask the question and you're like, oh shoot, I'm going to have to expose a little something here. So let me ask back to see if I can kind of wiggle my way out of that. So the fun thing though is just like, what's your experience? And then, and it's with professional development or with pursuit of this or that, and then just let it breathe. And at the back end, it's so great, because then inevitably, like your example of the why is like, they inevitably come back with like, man, that's so cool. Because they just like, really be like intentional and owning their experience. Right? Like we all want that. Like we all just want to be listened to and heard in such a raw and open way. And a lot of times people that are in the power position, they almost, even unintentionally, and maybe in the most well-mannered and well-intended ways, want to help, but it's almost like they pigeonhole and we don't really get to the place where we actually could help, because we've narrowed the conversation so narrow, and we don't know the why, and we don't know the history and the experience, and then we can't really help in a meaningful way, and then just becomes redundant. And it's like, oh yeah, I've heard this all 4 years of my career, or yeah, Dad, I've heard this is the same thing you asked me 2 months ago, right? And it's like, but
because I think when you're saying like a lot of, particularly type A, and not saying all type A, but you leave that area for silence that's uncomfortable for a type A. And so then they'll ask another question. So it's that pigeonholing, but because I didn't want to feel uncomfortable, I now pigeonholed you into something, and now you're uncomfortable. So like we're all just uncomfortable.
I heard like such a great, like in a team setting or like in a staff setting, a great way to sort of have a healthier conversation, or at least to get the conversation off to where everyone gets a moment to be heard, because inevitably in coaching, we have this a lot, but I would think it's in almost every walk of life in a professional team setting, is that you have the type A's and then you have the people that are more thoughtful and more introspective. But like we labeled it like you have a batting lineup. So like, we're going to discuss this topic, and Leilani, you're going first. Okay, I'm going second. So-and-so's going third. So-and-so's, and like literally we're going to go around the horn, because and every situation can create the parameters how they want. But what happens is you do have those people on your team that they don't just go stream of consciousness and have something articulate to say. Like they literally need that silence. And what it does is, to your point, it controls the type A who put out their thought, and then the room goes quiet. Yeah. And it's like they freak out. And yet maybe that other person who's much more introspective and needed just that quiet, just a moment to get their thought, it's about ready to come out. So I know that is something I've heard that works well. I have not been in a setting where I've gotten to try it, but I can, from a logical standpoint, it seems like it would be cool. And as a type A person, would really help shut my mouth sometimes.
Yeah. I know we have like 15 minutes left, but I wanted to jump back into your podcast and your show. It's an interesting time where you coaches aren't having to go recruit, and you're not having to travel, and you're not, rebounding or whatever this time would be right now. And so you have the space to be able to have this show. One, if you could talk about the show, how it got started, what the premise of it is, and two, how will it look once you are back at practice and season does start, and where do you see this going?
The show started, the colleagues that are involved, Brian Rosario, who's a coach at Pepperdine, Tony Perotti, who's back in New York, Justin Skanson, who works in sports technology but was a coach for a long time, lives in Nevada, and Gavin Peterson, who's now at University of Utah. All of us have been in the business basically we all came into Division I coaching around the same time. So we've known each other for, nearly 2 decades. We always meet together every year at the Final Four. We always do a dinner. The group at the dinner is always, has had people come and go over the years, but really this group of us has really stayed very connected. And so I think the conversation was like, well, sort of half joking, was like, well, we're not going to get to go to have dinner this year. And so, so we were actually having like these little kind of what we're doing now, just with us. And I think Brian or somebody brought up like, well, should we do this? We've sort of like joked about it. But then it was like, okay, well, let's do it. And it was like, because everybody was doing it. So it was kind of like, well, let's do it. But then we wanted to be intentional about it and being different. Like there was so much good stuff out there as far as like X's and O's and, like leadership and stuff like that. And it was like, there's just really good stuff out there. But we were sort of like, what do we want? We wanted to sort of mentor younger coaches maybe that are in maybe 3-5 years, and they're maybe at that point where it's a little bit hard. And they're like, do I like this? And, we wanted to give the perspective of, yeah, we've been there, we get it, we understand it, and we've come out the other side, and have, and are doing it from a place of joy. And so that was really the premise and the backstory on why we started it. And so moving forward, we've really tried to be intentional with being really well-rounded with different thought leaders, that people in the business, people that are communication specialists, people that are coaches, high performance coaches, so that's really like sort of our intention with it, and just doing kind of like what you and I are now, but just having a conversation with, their viewpoint of the profession of a coach, and yet when you really pull back and, you've been in sport, it's like sport is so great because it can be the skill sets that happen in sport, no matter what part of it you're involved with, are so transferable to life. And I think that's what we've unintentionally found, because every time we finish a show, we were like, oh my gosh, like I just got 5 nuggets that I'm using either in our next practice or at our next staff meeting or in my life with my job as a parent, you know, like, so we've inevitably become, by trying to pursue and become leaders, mentors, that we've found ourselves, you know, being open to having that come into our own lives through these conversations. So moving forward, we really are intending that it's going to move forward. You know, we've gone now to where we actually have, like, we film the show on Tuesdays, gets released on Fridays, but then Friday morning we actually have like a half-hour production meeting where we just get on and we talk about the next guest, and like we talk about what we want, topics that we might want to talk about in the future. So we've been very intentional about what it's looking like moving forward. So you know, again, I don't know where this journey, that journey will take us ultimately, but I know we're being very intentional about, it's not something that we're intending to stop. You know, it may be something where, you know, like the entertainment world, where they'll film 2 episodes of Jeopardy a day, and then so that way they have a bunch of extra ones, you know, and it's like, so I mean, we may get to that place at some point, I don't know, but for now, to your point, we have the ability to carve out, you know, a couple hours a week to film the show on a Tuesday, and another hour to sort of prep on Fridays. So I think we're all smart enough to know that'll probably not work when we move forward, but by that time, I think we'll have a good rhythm and a good hang of where things are going. So
yeah. It's interesting, like when you talk about doing multiple in one day, I think of Rogan, and sometimes he has like 5 guests in one day. I'm like, dude, your conversations are 3 hours long. You're doing 5 in a day? Like, that new mood, or not new mood, what does he use? Alpha brain must be working.
But I think too, though, it's like if you're wired to be challenged and to seek knowledge, and you're such a free, in that space of free thinking, like your soul is being fed by those hours.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
You know, it's so easy, you know, like that's why, I mean, this has been easy with you, because I know you well enough to know that you are in that pursuit of yourself. And so when you get into that space and, you know, you're giving each other space to share, it's like, it's really affirming and fuel. So, and I think that's that's where you want to be. You want to be like that when you're having a beer with your mates. You want to be like that with your professional life, and you want to be with that with your partners. It's like, that's how we should be. And it's going to be ugly and grimy and challenging at times, but it's also going to be incredibly beautiful and joyful in that space.
Yeah. So the last question I have for you is golden nuggets. Any key advice, if, you know, particularly if somebody is transitioning from playing to whatever it is after, like you're working with a lot of college kids that probably aren't going to play professionally, or they will. What do you tell them, and how do you help them figure out what's next? What's kind of your go-to advice for that?
We try to really hone back in on some of the nuggets that I've dropped. And again, I referenced before, is like, you kind of have to meet people where they're at a little bit when you're trying to maybe challenge them, or because you don't necessarily know their history or their why yet, and maybe they don't know it yet. So at times when they're playing, you know, they're 18 to 22 years old, pretty idealistic. And it's like, you know, their view is through a lens that's just so tiny. You know, they don't have a lot of things. But now as they get older, you start dropping those nuggets of the pursuit of joy is so much more fulfilling than the pursuit of happiness. And you can't necessarily get into that in a deep way like maybe you and I have today, but you start dropping those nuggets, and you call them on some things. And like, you know, you looking at different makeup artists on Instagram for the last 35 minutes, like, talk to me about that experience. And like literally something like that. And then through that, maybe you lead into some way able to like is that making you happy or is that making you joyful? And but innately I want to go like, that's really dumb. Like, what are you doing? Like, you would be best served. But then if what happens, and this has happened one time, Leilani, is then what the answer I got was, Coach, I want to be a makeup artist. So like, if I had just run roughshod and just abused them, like as like in a way of like, oh, that's so dumb. You're on Instagram looking at different ways to put on makeup, like thinking that they were being so innately selfish. And yeah, like I probably am right if I said that most of the time, but that one time, it's all it takes is to, oh my God, like this is, thank God I didn't say that. Like I would have literally just, because I'm in a place of influence, I'm in a place of like, I could have maybe just set her back for 10 years because somebody who's a mentor for her thinks that that's dumb, that she's looking at makeup things, but yeah, that's what fuels her soul.
Yeah.
So I say that, so we drop those nuggets along the way. So again, when they finish, it's kind of like that manifestation of, okay, remember that moment, or remember this is what we're driving. Like, and I was saying, I just was talking to a player that just graduated before we came on, like, because she's in that debate. Do I go to school, go to PT school, or do I go keep playing because she's good enough to keep playing? And it's like, I said, you need to figure out what makes the joy is your top, and like whatever that looks like, take the boxes off. Yeah, if you have some responsibilities, if you've got to take care of a parent or take care of a child or whatever you're like, but then after that, there's no box, and you got to just go for it. Not do it because everyone else thinks you should or where you should be. And I know your path well enough to know that you've had that same journey. Is like, you got yourself out of the box and you've become so involved in such an eclectic group of things that it's really framed you to be in the space of inspiring the people you're doing with this show, with the other work that you do. It's like, but that space is what fuels your joy, and it doesn't. So, and then whatever thing else happens around that, it's like, it's noise. It doesn't matter. Right. Yeah. It's like, it's going to go away. It's like, okay, I'm going to, it's fine. It's like, if I have to do that to get me to where I want to be, perfect. That's fine. I'm good. I got, that's no big deal.
Yeah. It's trusting that like everything else will fall into place once you're in that state of joy.
Right. Yeah. Right. And I try to really be vulnerable too, with them. Right. Like I try to really like, this is how I screwed it up, and this is what I found. And like, this has been my journey. Like, and all I share is not saying you should take my path. All I'm saying is be willing to be vulnerable through the journey.
Yeah.
And through that vulnerability and seeking people that are going to challenge you, and seeking those conversations and asking about other people's experiences, you're inevitably going to start shaping and framing what you want to do. Right. Yeah. And so I think through that, when you're in that space of like, you've got the lens is really long, and you still see the journey is still so far in front of you. And what's fun is because like today, the conversation, she's like, Coach, I know I've got so much in front of me, but the regular thinkers, the simple thinkers that want to put you out, you mentioned labels. It's like, they want to it's like, and we feel this pressure to like, that is our measuring stick of success.
Yeah.
And so it's fun to like get to hear them start talking about like, I know I don't have to have that label, and I don't have to, and this and that. And so that's probably the way we go about it. You try to plant those seeds early and meet them where they're at. Some of them you get to be around, have them for 4 years, 5 years sometimes. And some of them you only get them for a year if they transfer in, but that investment, and then hopefully you're planting a seed that then they pay that forward, and they're doing work like in their life moving forward of having people and challenging people to think differently and pursue those kind of things. But that ability to encourage them to pursue joy, and pursue joy in a space that they're going to be so much better to everyone around themselves, better to the universe, and really say, hey, I got you. If it screws up, I'm here.
Yeah.
Have them seek those foundation people that they know that they can have that conversation with. Some of them it's their teammates. Some of them might be another coach. Some of it's maybe, you know, and you brought up, for me, it's people outside of my profession, you know, and it's like I seek that on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Because they help shape a lot of, because they bring perception of my profession, their perception of my profession, and the challenging questions that they ask allows me to really sink down better in a more meaningful way in what I'm doing.
Yeah. I think it's so helpful to see someone's perspective from the outside, because when you're inundated in what you do so often, it's blinders and you forget how else things can be done.
Yeah,
so, yeah.
For sure.
Cool.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Jesse.
That was
Yeah.
an awesome conversation.
Most
Loved
def.
it.
I feel like we could
Loved
keep
it.
going, but I want to
We
respect your time.
could probably do a whole part 2 if we wanted to, right?
Yeah,
We
let's
could
set that
double
up.
release. So,
Yeah.
but thank you so much. I love how you framed the question of how we got here. It's such a cool way to start the show, and it makes it unique to yours. So I appreciate you asking the question.
Yeah. Thank you for showing up honestly and fully and being willing to share.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I'm going to stop recording now. Hold on.